Nixops. Hope everyone's doing well today. We're going to start on discussion about a few things. Primary going to be the start with the ledger hack and the services compromising. We're going to go over a few other things. At this time, we're going to also discuss a couple of future things that are going on, as well as Samurai Wallet and discussion on Tether. That Tether discussion where I'll be joined with a round panel with Kyle Gibson and Bennett Tomlin and Cass Beyonce. Tonight we were listening to Grateful Dead, or Dead and Company, sorry. This is Playing in the Sand, listening from 2018. So let's look at some of the big events that happened this week. One of them being the hack. Ledger hack was indicative of centralized services and another God mode-like attack or potential attack, because basically what occurred was a database leak of information, including customer data, which each customer has crypto. So the dangerous part about that, and a lot of people are going to start learning and seeing, is that instead of attacking who owns the wallet as far as trying to guess the cryptographic key, the real goal in the future will be just to attack services that you rely on. This is a huge step forward, because now, as everyone's starting to use KYC services and dependent on these types of things, you're going to see a very stark contrast in the way that attack vectors are opened up. This being one of them. You may find it silly that, oh, I just bought one, I bought Ledger, bought Nano, bought whatever, any type of wallet, and your information is stored in their database. The dangerous part about that is because you have cryptocurrency, you have to remember that quite literally it ties you to owning it. That is also an IRS issue, and it could also be a physical danger issue. Why? Because if you're on Twitter or anything like that, and they know that you have one, they can literally obtain your phone number and various other aspects and information from or about you from these third parties that you've willingly given it to them to buy a product and or to use their products or services. Now, this applies to everything. This isn't just on the wallet side. Look at every service you use, whether it be Netflix, whether you're using Twitter, whether you're using any social media, any type of platform that uses an authentication measure against a database that stores records and profiles. Now, the dangerous part about that is everything that you come across in your day-to-day is quite literally going to use a service of some sort. Software as a service is here to stay. It's part of our life. Reason why is because running everything native is not ideal. It also requires a lot from the user. So web services and things that you use today are for simplifying your workload and simplifying how you actually run things. And so what you want to do is you want to spend time to actually learn why this is a risk to you, not just from oh, Daniel's telling me this. No, this is actually going to be more like, what information are you willing to disclose? And what I mean by that is, think about what you're willing to disclose to me. You don't even know me. Think about what you're willing to disclose to someone else that you don't know. And think about what reliance on a third party that you have. Think about all the third parties that you use. Think about anything stemming from your cell phone provider to even YouTube or Google in this case, right? Think about all the information they collect on you. Understand that just because one leak is seen as just one leak, understand that you probably use the same email for certain types of things. And the problem with that is that leads to a traceability. So now all of a sudden you figure, well, I dumped the passwords off of so-and-so's database. I see that we'll say John at Proton Mail or whoever web service, lol@u.com, for example, has an account. Now I find on another database dump that they have also an account. What is the likelihood of them using a password or similar password and or maybe have the same auth key set up? Very high. Reason why is because people are lazy as fuck, myself included. But it is always good OPSEC, to build a matrices, if you will, of complicated passwords and things that you can remember. But you should never reuse the same one, because quite literally, what if they're using the same password salt? Now they know for sure that they're able to identify that it is probably you with good judgment. And then what you got to figure out from there is what vulnerabilities or what risks do you have with that? The risk that you can, that you need to really engage yourself on is what's going to happen with regards to whether or not someone else figures out that password. What other information is it tied to? Is it tied to your actual email? Is it tied to your phone number? Is it tied to, I don't know, your exchange account? Those are all valid questions you need to ask yourself when you sign up for a service. And I highly recommend using throwaway email accounts or email accounts that serve one purpose, meaning for some shitty newsletter that somebody sends you every week regarding, I don't know, day trading and, pig future or pork futures. You may want it sent to like pork@yahoo.com. For something else, you may want, a more specific email for that specific task. That's left up to you, but you should definitely take it to your advantage to not actually go through the process of reusing passwords, just like you should never reuse your public key and you should never reuse Bitcoin address. Now, today we're going to go over what a public key is and what a private key is and how all that relates to Bitcoin and why all of that's important for you to know. Because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is trying to help you understand how to be safer on the internet, as well as being safer and utilizing the tools that you're aware of, or maybe you're not aware of. This is all learning experience for you, as for me, to help guide you through this. So a lot of times people often get confused with public and private keys as being only related to Bitcoin. They are not. It's actually the opposite way around. Public-private key pair generation started in the 1990s with Zimmerman and the creation of PGP. Our buddy Hal Finney worked there too. Now, PGP was the idea of pretty good privacy, or the idea of taking a phrase, or what we use in cryptocurrency called a seed, is to literally derive a key from that, or to sign a private key and then derive public keys from that private key. Bitcoin does this as well. That's why when there are vulnerabilities found in PGP, they have to go in and review the source code for Bitcoin to make sure that it's also not vulnerable. That's why there's several series of tests that are ran. This is why these types of exploits, or not exploits, but vulnerabilities, sometimes exploits, have to be thoroughly reviewed, because it is important to understand that just because in the world of a narrative that you believe that Bitcoin doesn't operate this way, this is actually how it operates. So once you take and you look at, all right, this is my key, how am I going to generate it? Well, that uses RSA. Now you can also use DSA and various other GPG algorithms, but it is best to use RSA, and it's best to use 4096 or 4096 bytes. Now what that means is that basically you're having 4 kilobytes in relation to the key for every character that you have to guarantee strength. It also guarantees that the encryption is going to take, or the cryptography is going to take millennia to break, is the strongest form that we have at this time. I'm not trying to go into a deep dive into bit shifting, how that works, what an orchestration of key ciphers and that kind of thing are. I feel that's a little, it's not for this kind of audience with regards to how deep we want to go. But what we want to take a look at is we want to take a look at how one, like yourself, may want to actually do GPG and how you may want to set it up. So I've set up a little demo here, and I'm going to walk you through how to do it on Linux. I'm going to do it on Mac. However, I'm going to be using my Mac. I'm actually shelled into an AWS box, and then I'm going to walk you through it so that you can generate your own key. And then not to mention, you can start signing and encrypting files. Now, if you are using Windows, I am sorry. I do not do anything with Windows. I apologize in advance. You should probably get off using Windows if you are involved in the space in any way, shape, or form. Only if you're worried about privacy. Now, if you make your money writing on Windows, by all means, write on it. Now, for Mac, the easiest way of doing this is literally just going to gpgtools.org. I'll post the link in chat. And literally from gpgtools.org, you will be able to, let me make sure that's the right one. Yes, so that's the right address. So once you go there, if you're a Mac user, you literally just download it. It plugs in the mail. It plugs in nicely to the operating system. It just allows you to have a right click for encryption, decryption, signing a message, verifying, that kind of thing. You can also encrypt files, send your public key, all of that. Well done implementing the UI. And the user experience is pretty good. Now, in regards to Linux, you're going to need to know some command line. As to my knowledge, there's really no good GPG tools available for Linux for UI users. For Windows, I think GPG for Win works still. I'm not sure. I don't use Windows. But I would suggest installing one of those programs now. And if you're on Linux, you want to use your package manager to install GPG if it's not already installed. To test for this, I'm about to share my screen for you all. All right, you guys see that? Let's make sure here, I'm going to move it around on the stream. Apologize for a second. I got this done. Let's see, where is it? Oh, not looking good. Give me one moment. I'm just going to go ahead and share my entire desktop. It's fine. Oh, there we go. I can see it now. All right, cool. So now that we can see this, let's make sure the commands and inputs are there. All right, hold on one second. I'm going to do my entire desktop here. It's easier that way. One second, everybody. I apologize in advance. Having some issues here. Good job, Apple, for being shit. All right, here we go. Full desktop share. All right, great. So here's my show. I'm logged into a Linux box. Make sure you guys can all see that on the screen there. Perfect. Background so I can see what you guys are saying. Thank you, Surfing App. All right, great. So basically, this is the Linux version we are on. It is in a V1.2 box that is chilling in Amazon land. Maybe a little bit of recursion on the screen. Please ignore. Which did it a lot, which is interesting. So here we go. Right now we are running Linux. It's an Amazon-based EC2. So here we're going to go which GPG, or in this case GPG. Anytime you're working in Linux and you're wondering if a command is mapped to your profile, the command which plus the command you wish to execute will tell you the path if it is located in your profile and findable. If not, use the command locate. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at actually running the commands to do this. So since I was lazy and I set this up beforehand, we're going to go take a look at these commands. There we go. So now we're going to generate a key. I'm going to walk you through this process. So now if we're going to full generate key, we're going to say, there we go. All right. So here we're going to set up a conf file that's going to be created. No options. You got to turn this run. Give me a second here. One moment. Are we having recursion bad on the screen there? Yeah, one second. Apologize for that. Give me one moment. Sorry about that, guys. I had an issue there. It's set back up now. All right, so use GPG -- gen key. Now you can see just the terminal, which is good because now you got the full extent of my mistake there. All right, so now we're going to press the option number 1. And now what we're going to do is what we want the key size to be. So in this case, we want it 4096. Recommends 2048. Please don't use that. Those are weaker. So now, oh, I mistyped. Sorry about that. There we go, 4096. Now we want the key to be valid. So what we want to do is we want to say we're going to let it expire for, say, 1 year. This key will be valid for 1 year. And we say yes. It'll validate at this date. All right. So now for the real name, we're just going to put LOL test. You put whatever you want to. In this case, you're going to lol@u.com. Email address we're using. Comment, nothing. And then we're going to say we're good by hitting the O. And now we're going to select the passphrase. Now, this is important to remember when you're setting up a passphrase. You need to set up something that's complicated. Edward Snowden had already given some great advice about using spaces and including things in comments like, Margaret Thatcher is extremely hot. Various things that he had included in his keys or as an idea as a passphrase. So what you want to do is you want to do this as something that you're going to remember, something unique, but something that also incorporates spaces as well as special characters, capitals, and numbers so that you have complexity. Remember, just because you may not understand how password brute forcing works, it is important to understand that there are tools that are available to brute force keys. And one of the ways that they do this is a simple auth measures, right? To authenticate against the key or to unlock the key or to attempt to sign with it. What you have to understand is that literally brute forcing is one of the ways that most people attempt to do it, but brute forcing with a strong password will take a long time and sometimes not even worth the hassle. Now, in Bitcoin, what happens is phrases are generated, right? So like in most cryptocurrencies, we use phrases in this part to automate it with spaces. That way the mnemonics are harder to guess, makes it much more complicated. Now, you could also use the dice method, which is create a word list and then, start with however many dice you want, start your numbers with the word list, roll those dice, use any combination of the numbers, and from there, being able to derive a key of words. And then from there, you can actually use that key. Now, many people have asked me recently why I don't use hardware wallets and then why I don't use backup in that way. I prefer paper. I prefer USB and or drives or devices dedicated to the sole purpose of what I'm storing on there, as well as backups. It's important to note that because you need to understand the devices fail. The more moving parts on a device, the more likely it is to fail. Sorry for the noise in the back. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get our phrases in. So as you notice here, I was told that I have an insecure password. Now, the reason why I did that was because I simply wrote out a sentence. However, that sentence had no originality. So GPG caught that and telling me now that I should definitely change and use a more secure password. And so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go ahead and do that. So see. All right, so now we're going to generate a bunch of entropy. For anybody that doesn't know, entropy is random data. Now, that random data is used to create a map that is then used with the ellipse to form your elliptic curve cryptography if you're wondering about signing. But this is also the method in which keys are generated. And so basically what you want to do is now at this point, you can see that there's a fingerprint, a marginals, complete, transaction route. Then you see the expiration, key fingerprint, user IDs, this, as well as a subkey. At this point, you now have a valid key, and you can use this key to sign and encrypt data. You can also use this key to now sign and encrypt emails, and you can also import keys of other people who sign their emails to verify that they are the people who sent you that information. This is important when dealing with cryptography. This is also very important when wanting to verify someone from a third-party source. For example, a lot of times in dark net markets, this is a way that we authenticate one user or share from one operator may share with another operator not to deal with someone using this key. The reason why is because they're identifiable, but they're cryptographically verifiable, meaning if someone signed with the same public key on two different messages, it's indicative that it is the same person. So a lot of times people will utilize the same keys because they're unfamiliar with actually how keys work. And so a lot of scammers will do this too. They will attempt to use the same key repeatedly and get caught. That's a lot of times how they get caught, is because they're not changing keys. This is also, unfortunately, how Russ got caught, Russ Albright, with the Silk Road, because he signed a message and put a key up on the Stack Overflow for Frosty at Frosty. He also used that same key for the Silk Road login. And what you got to understand is that those pieces are very important because they're cryptographical proof. Just like signing a message, Bitcoin that you're more familiar with than most of you are, what you're going to find is that's the same process. We're still signing a key. We're using a key to sign a message. That message can then be verified whether or not that message was signed with the appropriate key. This is literally cryptographical verification. So once you take a look at that and you get a full grasp of how that kind of works, we can take a look at some of the auxiliary steps in this. Now we can start looking at GPG options. We can take a look at generating messages. So for example, we want to go to, we'll say, GPG help here. We want to take a look at these options now. Now we can clearly sign, we can clear text, we can detach sign, we can encrypt, we can use symmetric, we can verify, we can do various things. And the important piece of that is that what that gives us is the ability to verify others plus verify ourselves if we need to. So you may have heard of experiments done with like proof of life, things that I've done with ham radio, things that others have done like Julian Assange with Bitcoin, things like that. It is literally the same thing. We're using keys to sign messages that we're still alive and or still operational or not incapacitated in such a way that we don't have access to the keys or services to sign them. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to stop one moment here because I need to fix this formatting. Give me 1 second, folks. Oops. There we go. There we go. Stop share. There we go. All right, cool. So now that we have that kind of handled, what we're going to do now is we're going to actually take a look at some of the other options of GPG. I'm taking a few moments here to ask in chat if anyone has any questions so far about the process of setting up a key. Does anyone have any questions about that? It's important to ask now because closed mouths don't get fed. Correct. Shut your mouth. All right, so I'm going to give it just a few more seconds here because I know that there's a slight delay here with the live stream. It kind of sucks that way, but not a lot we can do. Yeah, give me 1 second here. We're going to go ahead and screen share back up. All right. All right, cool. So here we go. We're going to go back to sharing now. I apologize for that, everyone. There we go. That done. All right, cool. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to sign the key. Now, the important piece of signing the key is that this is going to make sure that the key has not been modified even on the local. So one of the things to keep in mind is that a lot of sysadmins and others may use this method to verify whether or not a device has been tampered with. So what you want to do is you want to sign the key right here. In this case, we'll say lolu.com. What we see there is that, we see the test. We see that everything is there. It's signed by the key. List is to sign, nothing to sign. Now, if we want to sign the key lolu.com, we'll say, let's touch the file here. So let's go to the encrypt, my bad. Sorry about that. So here we go. We're going to actually use this because I am lazy. And here we're going to be prompted to put in the secret key for the certificate, right? Here we go. And there we go. It's unlocked. And now we're going to see that the key's not changed. And then we have the message box. Everything is there. So now we've signed. We've actually done the encrypted armor. Now we can actually set this up. If we wanted to encrypt something, literally pump it into here. And then after we finish it, we can completely encrypt the file. Only people that were in my keyring that I choose to expose that to would be allowed to see it if I chose to add them to it. Now, what that means is that basically, if I have your public key, you have my public key that I'm signing a particular piece for, then we can see each other's encrypted messages. That's the point. It's public key and private key verification. Private key verification comes from being able to sign. The public key verification is from one user's public key or key they distributed to another user. Now keep in mind that a public key does not have to be uploaded to a key server. It is important to remember that you may also have multiple public keys when dealing with GPG. I'm going to let that run off on your little minds on how to do that. And I'm not being belittling by saying little. I'm just saying you should get creative with how you look at keys. You also should get creative of how you look at authentication. So going back to the hack, going back to the Twitter hack, going back to the Ledger hack, everything, right? What we're looking at is that services are failing in the sense of being able to keep your private data private. Now, one method that has been talked about and used before in some services and is becoming more popular, and the idea is using public keys. Public keys are a great way to actually be able to verify authentication. And so if you take a look at it from that standpoint, the greatest thing that one could do is create a distributed auth method that utilizes public private keys. This is similar to what Bitcoin actually does now. This is similar to what all your cryptocurrencies are actually doing. So what would be intelligent for someone to devise is a way of being able to have the user sign, upload, and be able to manage with that data. That means the user would actually own their data. See, that's the dangerous part. No one wants to do that because your data is worth money. So while these auth measures do exist to protect you, companies don't want to implement them because it costs money to run companies, right? It costs money to run software. It costs a lot of money to be able to manage certain things, such as, like cost of servers, database, paying people, various things like that. And so what you really want to look at is how much is your data worth to this particular company, right? So in the case of like Twitter, other social media platforms like Facebook, hell, even though blockchain, which was literally supposed to be decentralized and everything, is not. They have a centralized services running AWS land with a database using, I think, Twilio for their phone verification. So quite literally, they're using the same thing in the other social media services doing, but they're marketing as they're not. So what you got to start looking at is how much power do you want to allow a company, a third party, or a platform? I say platform kind of as a misnomer because they're really just services or places to store data. How much of that are you willing to allow someone else to have control over you? So when I say that, think about it like, we all talk about cryptocurrencies being the future and everything, but we really got to look at what's going on in regards to how we handle authentication and how we handle authentication in the future. If we switch to a private key auth model and allow the user to sign their data and store their data, not only does it verify as more proofable data, but it also will allow us to protect the data, because then no one but you would be able to unravel that data. However, there would have to be a transference of keys, and that gets down into like secure enclaving, how you want to handle that key, how you want to handle that object, how you want to handle the distribution from the encrypted data. I mean, there are various attack vectors you also have to consider that are part of that. But this method is still a lot more secure and can be secured cryptographically versus the methods we use now, which still are verified cryptographically, or signed, I should say, encrypted, or should be. It does not forbid anyone from being able to go pull the database and see that in whatever hash format they have. Now keep in mind, your password is most likely salted and hashed, but your username isn't, your whatever other personal information they gathered about you is not. And so with that considered, you need to understand the data pieces that they're selling are the pieces that aren't hashed. Nobody cares what your salted password is. Nobody cares what your salted email address is. What people care about is what information they have about your email, like your non-hashed email, and what's going on with that. Like the important piece to understand here is that everybody's data is worth pennies on the dollar until it's been verified. Well, again, cross-check verification states that if I found your email address for, we'll say, Yahoo on a database dump, then I found your email address on LinkedIn on a database dump, and on a Facebook database dump, there's a high likelihood you're using that email at all three. That means that if I can get access to that email, now all of a sudden I have access to you. But let's say I also look at some other things that maybe your email address was on. Maybe I go to have I been pawn.com and I start looking, or .org I think it is now, or was, and I start looking at your email and I see what dumps your email were used in. Now I have a good idea as to what type of person you are. Now I can determine, okay, cool. Well, we'll say this person's email, we'll say John at Proton or whatever, John at yahoo.com. Now John's been busted because found his email on LinkedIn, I found it on Facebook, found it on Twitter, found it on Yahoo, and guess what? I also found it in an Ashley Madison dump because I was able to search that information because it's all publicly available. So now I have a pretty good idea this person, John, at yahoo.com or whatever email service, is using these services, but I also have a pretty good idea that the person's still around, that email's still active. So then I have one or two options. I can fish for the data, or if I verify also that you have a Ledger account or Casa or anything else that's been, that has been hacked or not been hacked yet, then literally I'm able to prove that you have something I may want. Now, not only do I have multiple avenues to be able to track you, now I have multiple ways to verify that you were this person. Same thing goes with forums, same thing goes with everything. You have to understand your attack vectors when you start dealing with the privacy of the individual. And when you start talking about auth measures, which forbode the user owning the data, this is why I'm encouraging people to switch to looking into auth measures that include signing, that include verification for the user, not KYC, cryptographic verification, signing of a message, or encrypting the data and uploading the data raw. That way that they have to store it as you have sent it, meaning it's verifiable that that data is correct based on what you provided them or not. Now this provides you, the user, with the ability to both have data and uses that you may need to suffice their needs, but also to encrypt and protect yourself. But see, this right here takes away control from the companies. It also cuts into their bottom line. So it's just some factors that, if you're a young aspiring app developer, or say, for example, you work in an enterprise, you're looking at how to expand your auth measures, or wanting to look at different methods to auth, just something to consider is that, private public keys are a great way to go. We use them in Bitcoin, use them in GPG, use them every day, and you don't even realize it. So, well, enough of that soup talk on GPG. I had to do a crash course because some of you asked for me to show you commands and make you not afraid of using the terminal. I only did a few things, but understand that right there is quite the simplest way of doing it is just to do it. So those of you who followed along, good job. Those of you that didn't ask questions because nobody bothered to on that, then good job. So in the upcoming, weeks, we're going to go visiting some very interesting topics with some very good friends of mine, some other guests and stuff. And I want to point out that some of the topics may or may not be for the faint of heart. Some of them may be overwhelming. If they are overwhelming, I apologize in advance. The goal with what we're trying to move forward with is just like with this GPG demonstration of showing you how easy it is to set up a key, what you should run, how you should do it, those types of things. Those are basic introductions, soft introductions as to what you can do. You can never fully teach someone everything. They're going to have to want to learn it. You're not going to ever learn what you don't want to know. And so because of that being a hard fact, one has to really start looking at, if this is stuff that you're concerned about, I mean your OPSEC, you're going to have to spend time to learn about how to protect it, you know. And through the next couple of sessions with friends and other people and some interesting guests, we're going to go over proper ways of like actually demonstrating, maybe setting up a public key server for some of some of you guys to upload to test with, or do a key exchange, or even a key signing party, one that wouldn't be necessarily live streamed. Well, it could be live streamed, but it can be recorded, because we may disclose bits of a key and that could compromise someone's security. So what we want to do here is we want to get you good and ready on your OPSEC with GPG. Then we're going to get you good and ready on how to use email services with GPG correctly, meaning that you need to understand how you and the other person distribute your key. Could be through Signal, could not be through a key server, could be through another email, could be through it could be through various private messaging services. It could also be through Onion Share, those kind of things. Now, the reason that's important is because that's the first step in actually understanding of why it's important to understand keys, key management, how you are going to manage your keys, because how I manage my keys may not work for you, but it works for me because I've been doing this long enough. Now, newcomers and individuals who are just getting started with this, it can be overwhelming to take a look at these keys. And that's why the important piece is to not alienate yourself from it. So the scope of this is to move you into using it, encouraging you to use it, and make it not alien. To everybody that's ever written code or ever dove into, looking at Linux or Unix, it can be intimidating if you're not used to command line. Same kind of principle here with GPG, same kind of principle here with encryption and cryptography as a whole. It can be very intimidating. But my goal here is to help you not be intimidated by it, but also to have a little fun. So when we start looking at the future of things, one of the other topics we're going to go over is the social media problems that are existent and plaguing. We see Twitter as being kind of like one of the more popular ones in this space, but there are better ones, and Node is not one of them. There are other options, but you need to understand what your risk, exposure, engagement, and compromise is. And the reason that's critical is because each one of them have their own risk, each one of them have their own exposure to like how much they know about you, and then how much one could derive from you. And then each one of them are going to fall back on, how much engagement you're going to get from other people. And whether or not there's also profitability or anything else associated with that, because I don't know what your intents are for using the platform. For myself, I use a platform as more of an outbound box and talk to some people. The majority of people have access to me that know me personally, via Signal, via Discord, that kind of thing, or Telegram, but mainly Signal. So when we start looking at the exposure piece, why is exposure important? Well, exposure is good because it exposes you to a wider audience, but it also exposes you to a wider audience, right? You can't have one without the other, positive and negative. So the larger audience is going to give you the better scope of engagement, meaning your likes, your retweets, whatever, people watching, people participating, that kind of thing. And then when you start breaking down, the exposure on the negative side is what people can derive from you, how much they know, what they can get from information you may be stating or information you may be providing, things like that. And all of that can be used either against you or for your favor. Now, there's a large community of people in this space called the Maxis who like to dox people when they get pissed off and various things. And so what you really want to do is you want to break it down to the fact that, what are you willing to compromise on? Meaning, are you willing to compromise that maybe this platform has more features you like? Maybe this platform has more people that you like, or maybe these people more of the same interest. Now, you have to outweigh that with what the exposure is and what your risk factor is. With the exposure and risk factors, you can calculate whether or not it's a good decision for you. I cannot do that for you. That is a personal choice. And when you start looking at those personal choices, that's something that a lot of people have a problem actually committing to, is understanding their personal choices. Because, say, for example, you are interested in learning something, but maybe you don't have time, or maybe you really don't feel like learning it, but you think you do. The dangerous part about that is that in half-assing your OPSEC can be dangerous. When I say dangerous, I mean it can be extremely dangerous. because all it takes is one wrong step with your OPSEC and your cryptography usage that can literally hang you. Ask Russ Albright. I mean, while he's not being hung, he's still in prison serving double life because one of the things that he has screwed up on, as mentioned earlier, is using the same key to sign. And that's dangerous to anyone that decides to do that because quite literally you don't know who the other person is, or maybe you do on the other side. And because of that, you need to understand that your verification risk. Like, do I care that I sent my public key to Joe Blow and Joe Blow may be able to one day implicate me in doing something maybe not so savory? It's a real risk factor that maybe you need to decide on. Or maybe you signed a message, saying something about something you were going to do, and then later details of that information was leaked, and that event had happened. That well, now you have a confession, basically a cryptographic confession. So it's very important to remember that while cryptography is great, encryption is great, it can be used against you if it's used improperly. So as I circling back, my goal is to help you understand and use them properly and to do them in bite-sized digestible forms so that it doesn't overwhelm you, but also to have, like I said, to have fun with it. I mean, again, how many tools do you know in software that allow you to play with darknet markets and do things maybe questionable by whatever state, country you may be in? Well, that's the benefits and also the cons, as it opens up that type of behavior on a libertarian side where we're all about the drugs and freedom and people have the self-sovereignty or whatnot, or it can be used by other people maybe not so positive, because a lot of times you don't really see the negative side of it. But everything that's good, for every good purpose, there's also negative purposes. So it's important to also remember that there are a lot of people in cryptography and encryption who are not necessarily savory or not necessarily a good person. And same goes in regular like non-cryptography, non-encryption, but it's even more prevalent in that space. And not necessarily to the developers, people who utilize it as advocates, but more or less people that are operating under certain guises. And again, you can't gatekeep it, because if you gatekeep it, the people who truly need it, like people trying to be clandestine with their governments, overreach, various things like that, it literally opens the door for more surveillance and being able to track who's using what and what's going on. And again, those keys are very critical to understand. So just like your Bitcoin key, treat all your GPG just the same way. Now, one of the cool things, and I'm going to pop this up with one more talk about what's coming up, and then we're going to open it up for questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer for you guys, and we'll shut down a little bit. All right, so on the 13th of August, we're going to have Ben Tomlin, we have Cass Beyonce, and we're going to have Kyle Gibson on talking about Tether. But we're not going to just be talking about Tether that you think about, oh, it's just, what is it? We're going to talk about what is it. We're going to talk about the origin. We're going to talk about, the scam, like the pseudo scams, the scams, the everything about it is questionable. And we're going to do some deep diving because those three gentlemen have done their research. One of them even went overseas to look for their offices. There is none. Same thing with some others with like Bitfinex and other things. But we're going to have a roundtable discussion on that. And then on the 20th, we're going to have Samurai Wallet pop on. And we're going to do a demo with mix in. We're going to do a memo with, or a demo with mixing out. We're going to pop in some sats to be mixed in the Whirlpool. And then we're going to turn around and show you some post-mix sats. Maybe we'll find a darknet market and buy some drugs. Who knows? But we're going to demonstrate that live with both, the Android app and how to use it and how all of that works, along with talking about some of the Ronin UI or Ronin products, stuff like that. All their tools are open source. I highly suggest you checking them out. If you care about your Bitcoin privacy, you use it. All right. So now I'm going to open up the questions. If anyone has anything they want to ask in regards to either GPG itself, why the tools section is going on, what music's playing, open the floor for any of them. All right, well, I got a private message on this one. Okay. So someone in private message had asked, what are the dangerous risks of utilizing GPG as a form of auth for a service? Well, that's a really good question. And the answer to that would be, well, you have to look at the factors of whether or not the auth measure could be broken or whether or not it could be exploited and in what way the auth is being locked. So if you're using it to encrypt data and to decrypt data, then you would have to share the object, right? So you would need to transmit the object one way or the other, or you would need to make sure that you have some kind of way of keeping possession of the encrypted object away from prying eyes, or maybe only distribute to someone who's signing or requesting with a public key or the bearer auth for that particular public key, depending on how you wanted to set that up. Yeah, I again, yeah. So all right, so he's basically asking, would that work at scale? And yes, it would work at scale. If you were using your own hardware, like say running your own servers, then basically what would happen then is you would utilize hardware accelerators. Maybe you want to use cryptographic accelerators on your motherboard if you were running like some servers. Sun used to have them a lot. They were really clutch during using Solaris zones, things like that. But yeah, so you could use cryptographic accelerators. You could use object instantiation verification. There's a lot of steps you could do with that. And if you want, you can just talk to me after this so we can get specifics, or you can DM me the specifics and I'll give you feedback. All right. Well, I don't know if anybody has any more questions, then I'm going to close down because this has mainly been an informative talk on auth and how to use GPG. And next week, we're going to be in for a real surprise. I'm going to keep it a secret till the day of. Well, okay, terminal cipher. All right, so mixing services are really good against chain analysis if the mixing services is using a non-sets. So Wasabi has had a problem with using full and non-sets recently. There are, issues with, which was, issues with relation to the data set that someone provided. Now that was some fun against Samurai. However, it's been proven that Wasabi can be peeled against. Ergo, from the OKXT people research team, they have definitely been peeling back some transactions of even the recent Twitter hacker who used Wasabi versus Samurai, even though Samurai ran a special promo code that day. So I don't know why I didn't take advantage of it, but that was there on them. But yeah, literally chain analysis is very ineffective unless there's a tieback, meaning the user mixed from one public address and then turned around and sent that same mixed UTXO to itself. I hope nobody does this, but I've seen stranger things. Well, the privacy features being applied to BTC, will it happen? Pros and cons. So it is already happening as secondary layer or secondary invocation, such as Whirlpool and services for like Whirlpool and stuff. Just like you have layer 2, implementing it into the core poses some serious questions because you have to also concern yourself with the legalities of self-mixing, right? So, exchanges and things like that also have a vested interest, as well as some miners and other people have concerns about implementing full-on privacy features and the impact of the chain, whether or not it'll impact data, whether or not it'll impact size of transactions in the future, what will happen, fees. You start looking at the full economic scale of that, and the chain becomes a different outlook versus, whether or not it's good or bad. Net positive is that privacy features are important and they should be implemented. Privacy services are also important too. And you should understand like which one works for you. Now, I suggest, doing your research, and that's what I did. That's why I stick by Samurai on that side. However, if a new one comes out that's really good, then, and cheaper, then of course you always go with the cheaper option. You always go with the option that makes sense from a capitalistic standpoint. And so, like, that's something that you got to look at, is that you got to figure out what works for you and what works for your needs. As I've mentioned before, software and everything else is different for each person. There's no silver bullet. There's no one solution fits all. And just because you implement the features doesn't mean everyone's going to use it. Rubicon FinTech, thanks for saying glad to see me back on Thursdays. Yeah, last week we were on Thursday. We just did it earlier to kind of get through some of the technical stuff. Yeah, the live will be able to be replayed past time, Kramer. It will be on the channel just like all the other ones. I just do the live with the chat so people can ask questions if they want to. You can DM me on the other platforms, that kind of stuff. So I'm checking them and just trying to make sure if people have questions, I answer them. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for the evening. I hope all of you join in next Thursday where we got a big surprise on talking about some off-grid. Gonna chit chat with a fellow friend of mine. We're gonna talk about some hacking. Gonna have a little bit of fun. And yeah, this prize will be announced the day before. The reason why is because, well, actually, be announced the day of. That way, everyone's kind of everybody's kind of on their toes about it because this person's special. So, you guys have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, night, whatever it may be for you. We're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. And thanks for tuning in. And join me next Thursday as we go back to doing more and showing more and educating people on OPSEC as well as talking about current and recent events that are going on. And stay safe out there, everyone. Bye.